every year since 9/11, Al-Qaeda's associate groups in Southeast Asia have been the most active globally, carrying out at least one major attack every year. Twice in Bali, twice in Jakarta, and the world's worst maritime terrorist attack in the Philippines in 2004. Connect the dots and they lead to and from 9/11, the deadliest terrorist attack in the world, designed by Al-Qaeda to inspire its followers for a global jihad.
In 1995, I spent weeks chasing a terrorist cell busted here in Manila. One man was arrested, perhaps the first commercial pilot recruited by a group we would later call Al-Qaeda. He told investigators about dozens of terrorist plots, including one so fantastic even the investigators couldn't believe it. I forgot about it until I saw it come alive on September 11th. That was the first lesson I learned in investigating Al-Qaeda. You have to have imagination. 11 years and hundreds of intelligence documents later, it comes down to this for me, meticulously connecting the dots to find they lead to the same small group of men inciting a global jihad. In the next 2 hours, we'll look at these so-called terrorists and the acts they've committed in the name of jihad. Why should you care? Why is this important for us Filipinos? Because the Al-Qaeda leaders who planned the September 11 attacks are the very same people who set up the terrorist networks, co-opted our homegrown groups, and funded their plots in our region. I'm Maria Ressa. Join me as we look at 9/11, the Philippine Connection.
Was intended to be mass murder.
Last month, British authorities uncovered a plot to simultaneously blow up 10 airplanes headed to the United States. That clogged airports around the world, including here in Manila, with extra security quickly put in place. Passengers were asked to check in their carry-on luggage and to discard all liquids and gels they were carrying. The plot called for terrorists to carry liquid explosives on board planes and to create a bomb using a detonator rigged from electronic devices. It's eerily familiar to General Rodolfo Mendoza, who helped foil a similar plot here in 1995.
The London bombing attempt is similar to the 1985 plot. The entire operational system is the same. The entire blueprint is the same.
It started in 1988 when Osama bin Laden sent his brother-in-law, Mohammed Jamal Khalifa, to the Philippines to allegedly set up a financial network.
We launched an operations, an intelligence operations, designed to unmask the terrorist financing structures, and Mohammed Jamal Khalifa was monitored to be in contact with the Abu Sayyaf as well as the MILF.
Mendoza documented the rise of radical Islamic fundamentalism in this classified report released in 1994. There was a dramatic rise in the number of mosques, charities, and groups linked to what he called the Osama bin Laden organization. That was accompanied by an increase in terrorist acts of nearly 150% from 1991 to 1994. Partly fueled, officials say, by operatives sent by bin Laden. Intelligence sources say many of them arrived in the Philippines between 1988 and 1994. Like Mohammed Sadiq Oday, who allegedly planned part of the 1998 U.S. Embassy bombings in East Africa while he was in Davao. Or sleeper agents like these men, whose names appeared in this 1994 report. 6 years later, after 9/11, police arrested them for setting up a support system for Al-Qaeda. Links like this are still being dismantled today.
They're waging a guerrilla war, and they'll strike at the time of their choosing. and they're very, very patient.
Former DILG Secretary Rafael Alunan discovered many of these links in working with his counterparts in the United States and Pakistan.
What we are facing here is a virulent strain of Islam. It is a small percentage of the Muslim world that is very radicalized and would like to impose on the rest of the world their view of Islam behind the barrel of a gun.
In the mid-90s, many of the operatives used the red light district as a cover, often using Filipinas as fronts to open bank accounts and buy cell phones. They stayed in places like this, the Josefa apartment on Quirino Avenue. In 1995, an accidental fire here led to the biggest counterterrorism breakthrough worldwide at that time. 43-year-old Astrid Fariscal remembers it well. She works in the same police station as her mother Ida, who died last April. Ida was the officer on duty that night in 1995. Security was on high alert for the visit of Pope John Paul II after the Vatican See had alerted the Philippines about a possible assassination plot from Middle Eastern terrorists. An officer went to investigate the fire nearby. When he returned, he talked about Pakistanis playing with firecrackers, but Ida thought there was something more.
Sabi niya, nakita ko sa may lababo, may mga powder. Sabi ng nanay ko, ba't maglalaro ng ng paputok kung galing nung daw yun, hindi nagamit ng bagong taon. Halika, balik tayo. May mahuhuli tayong terorist at bomba.
The Josefa Apartments is a block away from the Papal Nunciature, the home of the Vatican's ambassador to the Philippines. That was where the Pope would stay while in Manila. Ida was surprised by what she found at the apartment.
Pag-akyat niya, di pagbukas, nakita niya yung mga nanindig yung balahibo niya. Nakita niya na tubig yung mga ngayon, puso na ngayon. Lagana ng tubig na malalaki, bulak na malalaki. Paglakad niya, nakita niya, may picture si Papa.
Alam mo ang gagawin mo, di ba?
When I interviewed Ida for CNN in 2002, she told me the phone rang while she was in the room, frightening her. You remember the movie with Sylvester Stallone, The Specialist? She asked me. The telephone rang, and then when they picked it up, it triggered an explosion that split the building in two. She left the room quickly. Whatever the reason, her caution was good. FBI agents would later tell the Philippine police that the chemicals in the room were so flammable and unstable that a lit match or sparks from two objects rubbing together would have taken the building down. On her way out, she ran into one of the tenants of that apartment who tried to run away. She chased and arrested him, booking him under the pseudonym he gave, Saeed Ahmed. Ida says he tried to offer her a bribe for his release.
Nakikiusap ata sa nanay ko na nag-offer ng malaking pera. Dollar pa yun. I think $100,000 o basta mga ganun amount.
This was the tape police made as they searched the apartment. They found bottles of chemicals, timers, detonators, a photo of the Pope, and 2 remote-control pipe bombs under the sink. This was Ida in 1995, waiting outside the apartment while her superiors, including then WPD Chief Hermogenes Ebdane, inspected the apartment. Authorities questioned the Pakistani for 2 days with few results. That was when he was turned over to Mendoza, known as a skilled interrogator. For him, this is a test of wills, and his goal is to find the prisoner's weakness.
When I provoked him that he's nothing, I told him that you are irrelevant to me. He started to respond positively in a way that maybe he was challenged. So he told me that, don't you know that I'm important? You will be surprised if I will tell you.
The Pakistani turned out to be Abdul Hakim Murad, perhaps the first pilot recruited by Al-Qaeda. He trained as a commercial pilot in 4 schools in the United States, as well as in Dubai and at the Air Continental Flying School in Manila.
A young fellow, very decent looking, a fellow that you'd think couldn't harm a fly.
He first came to the Philippines in 1990 and stayed with some of the suspected terrorists Mendoza already had on his watch list. Mendoza interrogated him for more than 3 months, and during that time uncovered 4 of the 6 terrorist members of this Philippine cell, all connected to Osama bin Laden.
He told me that I was involved in the World Trade Center. If you believe me, it's fine. And I know Ramzi Youssef.
International terrorism first struck the U.S. homeland in February 1993 when a truck bomb exploded in the parking garage of the World Trade Center. When he arrived in Manila, Ramzi Youssef carried a $2 million reward on his head for that attack. Known as the Chemist, Youssef set off a truck bomb that had been used only once before in 73,000 explosions recorded by the FBI. According to classified documents obtained by ABS-CBN, Murad confessed he was the one who did structural studies of the World Trade Center for that 1993 attack, and that he had recommended to Youssef the World Trade Center to be the best target for bombing. From New York, Youssef fled to Pakistan, where he began an intensive explosives training course for Murad, and where he met with other members of their Manila cell. Wali Khan Amin Shah, who fought with Osama bin Laden in Afghanistan, and this man, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, the direct link to 9/11. The next time these men would meet again would be in the Philippines.
Al-Qaeda operated in the Philippines much like it did in the rest of the world. It tried to blend in, set up financial networks, and co-opt homegrown groups. Often the men did this by using local women to cement their new identities and establish them as respectable members of their new communities. More on what they did here when 9/11, the Philippine Connection, returns. Imagine how different the world would be if Murad had not been arrested in the Philippines in 1995. The Pope might have been assassinated in Manila. When Murad was arrested, the members of his terror cell were less than 2 weeks away from boarding their flights and carrying out spectacular simultaneous airplane attacks. These classified documents show exactly what they did here.
From Pakistan, Youssef came in through the back door, going to Basilan where he trained members of the Abu Sayyaf in the use of explosives. Separately, Wali Khan Amin Shah also set up training sessions with the Abu Sayyaf. At some point, Youssef became frustrated. This intelligence document states the Abu Sayyaf group's members only know about their assault rifles and nothing more. He called them illiterates. Murad, the pilot arrested in Josefa Apartments, told police that Youssef decided to set the bombs himself and claim credit for the Abu Sayyaf. That was for their plot to assassinate the Pope.
The idea there was for the Al-Qaeda to build up the reputation of the Abu Sayyaf. Okay. Even if they were the ones involved, they'd give the credit to Abu Sayyaf. And hopefully enable the Abu Sayyaf to gain more adherents.
Their terror cell had other plots: to assassinate U.S. President Bill Clinton on his trip to the Philippines, attacks on nuclear facilities in the United States, and attacks in France, Britain, and Sweden. They had several plots using airplanes. First, to use a crop duster plane to assassinate the Pope, which they ruled out once police announced there would be a no-fly zone in Manila during the Pope's visit.
I was amazed. Ramzi Youssef asked Murad if Murad is willing to dive crash the small chopper into the vehicle of the Pope.
A second plot involved a light plane loaded with explosives, which they would ram into the CIA headquarters in Langley, Virginia. The third is the best known, Operation Bujinka, detailed in this document from Youssef's laptop computer, using small, lethal bombs from liquid explosives to blow up 11 airplanes headed to the United States from Asia.
It was meant for Hollywood. It was a bestseller type, story. The assassination of the Pope was more or less scheduled for the middle of January, and Bujinka would be unleashed about a week later.
Everything goes back to Bujinka. Everything goes back to 1995.
By the time Yusuf rented the Josefa apartment, he had already tested his liquid bombs 3 times. He left behind a contact lens bomb at a mall in Cebu. That was followed by another explosion at Greenbelt Theater in Manila on December 1, 1994. U.S. court documents later revealed that bomb was planted by Wali Khan Amin Shah. Known as the Lion because of how he fought in Afghanistan, Wali Khan was the cell's financial link to Malaysia. 10 days after that Greenbelt bomb, Yusuf boarded Philippine Airlines Flight 434 to Cebu. He successfully evaded airport security and carried with him liquid explosives hidden in a contact lens bottle. Mid-air, he put the bomb together and planted it inside the life jacket under his seat. Then he got off in Cebu. 2 hours later, on its way to Japan, the bomb exploded, tearing a hole in the plane. It was able to make an emergency landing in Okinawa. 1 Japanese died. The test run was a success.
It was the first time that they came across information that a liquid bomb could have been used.
With a little more tinkering, Yusuf planned to cause an explosion large enough to destroy a commercial jet and kill all the passengers on board.
And that really sent alarm bells because we didn't have anything in our defense arsenal that could detect liquid bombs in the airports, in other places where mass transports were located.
Why were they doing this? The motivation then remains much the same today for Al-Qaeda and its associate groups. The idea that if one Muslim hurts, all Muslims hurt.
Fighting the infidels, okay, and achieving martyrdom, okay, for the sake of Allah, will bring them straight to heaven.
Murad said he hated America, its support of Israel, and what he called its anti-Muslim policies. Yusuf, Mendoza said, recruited Murad by fueling anger and resentment. The two went to intermediate and high school together.
It's a relation not only between friends, but also a relation between a professional and a amateur. It was Joseph who provided Murad the spiritual aspect that he has to be ready to die. He has to be a martyr.
But Yusuf wasn't the brains behind this operation. Unknown to the police then, another key figure was working behind Yusuf, his uncle Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, dubbed KSM by U.S. intelligence, known in Al-Qaeda as the Brain. The Manila cell was so compartmentalized that Murad never knew KSM's real name, but he told police this man was obsessed with airplanes. Together, KSM and Yusuf tested airport security while in Manila. According to this U.S. intelligence document, they took concentrated nitromethanine, which is readily available in the Philippines, and poured out the contents of 14 contact lens solution bottles and carefully refilled them with the liquid explosive. KSM carried 13 bottles, while Yusuf carried 1 on board a flight to Seoul. KSM also worked out how to clear airport security with a detonator. He taped a steel bolt to the arch of his foot and put a sock over it. Lucky because he was asked to take off his shoes. He carefully placed his foot down so the bolt would make no sound while the agent scanned his shoes with a metal detector. He made it through security. Now they were ready for Bujinka. Like the Philippine Airlines test run, they would board flights with liquid explosives and set bombs to explode after they get off the plane. If successful, nearly 4,000 people would have died in 12 near-simultaneous mid-air explosions.
We were very, very lucky that that accident took place because one thing led to the other. As we were saying at that time, may Diyos talaga.
The Josefa apartment fire helped uncover the cell and its plans, but there was one plot so fantastic no one paid attention, not the intelligence agencies and not journalists like me. This 1995 Philippine intelligence document states he will board any American commercial aircraft pretending to be an ordinary passenger. Then he will hijack said aircraft, control its cockpit, and dive it at the CIA headquarters. There will be no bomb or any explosive that he will use in its execution. It is simply a suicidal mission that he is very much willing to execute. Other targets named the World Trade Center and the Pentagon.
Could that have been a blueprint for 9/11?
In that operational plan, they were already discussing Langley, the Pentagon, World Trade Center. So it's definitely a blueprint for 9/11.
So it was really the blueprint. I would say the mother blueprint.
The man who made it happen is Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, who wired money to his nephew, Ramzi Youssef, for the 1993 World Trade Center bombing. They wanted to collapse one tower on top of another. They failed then, but they kept trying until they got it right. That's a key Al-Qaeda trait. It's a learning organization. Every failure has lessons for a future success.
These guys seem to have found their niche. If they're going to engage in mass murder, they're going to use mass transports.
Murad told Mendoza that suicide attacks would move beyond one man soon to larger operations by land, sea, and air, a foreshadowing of the Al-Qaeda attacks KSM would later be involved in. They already truck bombed the World Trade Center in 1993. 5 years later, KSM would take what he learned, fine-tune it, and successfully set off 2 truck bombs in U.S. embassies in Africa, killing 224 people. While in Manila, KSM went scuba diving, plotting an underwater attack, which Al-Qaeda developed and carried out in 2000, bombing the USS Cole in Yemen, killing 17 sailors and nearly sinking the $1 billion American warship. What KSM learned about airport security here, he passed on to another operative he ran, Richard Reed, the shoe bomber, who tried to bring down an American Airlines flight in 2001. He failed because he couldn't light the bomb. And of course, there is September 11.
They are very serious. They are so determined. They are obsessed to accomplish the plan. And if they have a plan and a blueprint, we have to deal with it seriously because they will not stop until this plan is executed.
Partly based on Murad's interrogation, Wali Khan Amin Shah was arrested in the Philippines, but he escaped from Philippine custody. 11 months later, he was captured in Malaysia. Ramzi Youssef fled the Philippines, but authorities caught him a few months later at a bin Laden guest house in Pakistan. An eyewitness told a reporter they took him without his shoes, his eyes were blindfolded, his head was covered, his arms and legs were tied. That eyewitness was registered under the name Khalid Sheikh. Much, much later, American authorities would realize they got Youssef, but missed KSM, who watched the arrest and was audaciously hiding in plain sight.
What kind of man is Khalid Sheikh Mohammed? Legendary in Al-Qaeda's ranks, someone who thinks fast, blends into the background, and whose obsession with airplanes gave Al-Qaeda its most spectacular plots. More on what he did in the Philippines when 9/11, the Philippine Connection returns. "9/11 shocked the world. It exposed the dangers of this virulent strain of Islam and the network that had been built below the surface. It changed the way most of us look at the world today. We want to warn you that what you're about to hear may be disturbing."
This was a 911 call placed by 32-year-old Melissa Doy after the planes crashed into the World Trade Center. She was on the 83rd floor of the South Tower.
Are they going to be able to get somebody up here? Well, of course, ma'am. We're coming up for you. Well, there's no one here yet, and the floor is completely engulfed. We're on the floor, and we can't breathe. Yeah. And it's very, very, very hot. The lights are on, but it's very hot. Ma'am. Very hot. We're all the way on the other side of Liberty, and it's very, very hot.
So
Listen, the call is in. I'm documenting. I'm gonna let those. Hold on 1 second, please. I'm gonna die, aren't I? No. I'm gonna die. Man. We're gonna think positive because you gotta help each other get off the floor. I'm gonna die.
Another caller, 46-year-old Kevin Cosgrove, was trapped on the 105th floor of the same building. He was on the line when the World Trade Center towers collapsed.
Lady, there's three of us in this office. We're not ready to die, but it's getting bad. Okay, so mine's Cosgrove. I must have called about a dozen times already. Cosgrove. My wife thinks I'm all right. I called her and said I was leaving the building. I was fine, and bang! Kelly! Doug Kelly is that right? Yeah. Doug Kelly's next to me. We're in John Astor's office. There's three of us in here. A-S-T-A-R-U. Hello? Hello. We're looking at the financial center. Three of us, two broken windows. Oh, God!
Melissa Doy and Kevin Cosgrove were among the nearly 3,000 people who died on 9/11. The man obsessed with airplanes who spent years planning the 9/11 attack was Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. He lived in the Philippines in 1994. According to Kuwaiti records, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed was born in 1965. His first known passport was issued by Pakistan. What stands out about KSM, according to friends who knew him, is his ability to blend in and his extraordinary caution. In all the time he was in the Philippines, KSM was known as Abdul Majid or Salem Ali. His English was fluent after attending 2 colleges in the United States. He was also fluent in Arabic, Farsi, Pashto, and his native Urdu. For a time, KSM lived in Josefa Apartments, but he moved out one day before Murad arrived and moved to this Green Hills condominium. He kept his cell tightly compartmentalized. Later, authorities would learn that KSM would train Al-Qaeda operatives in Western customs, including how to co-opt local women. While in the Philippines, he masqueraded as a wealthy Saudi sheikh and had at least 3 Filipina girlfriends.
These women, without them knowing, were performing jobs for the team that they don't know. So they were really surprised when we told them that you're dealing with the terrorists.
It's hard to know where the plots began and the good times ended. In early December 1994, KSM and Yusuf rented a helicopter from the Airlink International Aviation School. KSM was the pilot and flew the chopper over the Shiafa Dental Clinic on M. Adriatico Street in Ermita. He pulled out his cellular phone and dialed the number of the dentist he was dating and told her to come outside and waved to him. After the Bujinka plot was foiled, KSM flew to Pakistan. Shortly after, bin Laden began expanding Al-Qaeda's reach, and authorities in 3 continents now believe it was KSM who traveled the world searching for allies and recruits and assembling the worldwide network. American agents tracked him to Italy, Egypt, Singapore, Jordan, Thailand, the Philippines, Qatar, and even South America, according to investigators in Malaysia, where KSM, traveling under an Egyptian passport, got a Brazilian visa. Authorities in Qatar say he had more than 20 different passports.
Al-Qaeda has been able to co-opt all these regional elements and movements and given them focus and organization to strike against Americans and American interests throughout the world.
In 6 years, the Manila cell's plots involving planes evolved in different ways. The CIA says KSM proposed to bin Laden that the World Trade Center be targeted by small aircraft packed with explosives. Bin Laden reportedly suggested using larger planes. At one point, the plot called for 10 planes, 5 to attack the U.S. East Coast, 5 on the West Coast. Then it became simultaneous plane attacks in the United States and in Southeast Asia. This U.S. intelligence document states the plan involved hijacking 1 to 2 planes, probably originating from Bangkok, probably using about 10 Yemenis. KSM intended to crash the Asian flights at the same time as the US planes. At another point, KSM admitted that he planned a second wave of air attacks in the United States to come from Southeast Asia after the 9/11 attacks. He wanted to use Indonesian or Malaysian pilots.
They're very, very patient. They're not like politicians who have to worry about the next election. These guys can plan over a 100-year horizon or a 1,000-year horizon.
According to the 9/11 Commission report, Al-Qaeda's former military chief Mohammed Atef chose the hijackers from young Arab men who had no previous terrorist activities. After bin Laden approved the selection, KSM trained them and instructed them on acquiring pilot training and supervised the final touches of the September 11th operation. In 1999, KSM met with one group of September 11 hijackers in Germany, and a few months later, the second group in Malaysia. There, one of the last key members of the 1995 Manila cell finally surfaced when he set up a key Al-Qaeda meeting. Ridwan bin Isamuddin, better known as Hambali, now the operations chief of Jemaah Islamiyah, or JI.
He had a dual membership of both Al-Qaeda and JI. So he was the one in charge of all of the terrorist planning here in Southeast Asia.
In this apartment, the Malaysian Special Branch at the CIA's request took surveillance photographs of that Al-Qaeda meeting. It was between Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi, who crashed a plane into the Pentagon on 9/11, and Tawfiq bin Atash, who carried out the USS Cole bombing under KSM's direction. By that time, KSM was already planning his next attacks, this time in Southeast Asia. Just one day before 9/11, he sent this man, Mohammed Mansour Jabara, to activate terror plots in the Philippines. 20 years old, a Canadian born in Kuwait, Jabara's links go to the top. Shortly before he left for Asia, he met with Osama bin Laden. This intelligence document from the Philippines spells it out. Jabara, a personal choice of Osama bin Laden because of his mastery of the English language, was dispatched on September 10, 2001 by Al-Qaeda operations officer Khalid Sheikh Mohammed to assist in carrying out bombing activities in the Philippines. According to Canadian intelligence, KSM gave Jabara his first mission when they met in Pakistan, to attack the US and Israeli embassies in Manila. He learned code words. Terminal stood for Indonesia, market for Malaysia, hotel for the Philippines. They set up email accounts and KSM told him to leave before September 11. Jabara flew from Pakistan to Hong Kong. On TV, he saw the World Trade Centers collapse. He said he felt apprehensive, but remembered he was personally chosen by bin Laden for his mission. From Hong Kong, he flew to Malaysia, where he met with Hambali and other JI members. He said they discussed how much money and explosives they would need for the embassy targets in Manila. On September 22, Jabara flew to Manila with another Arab who had been chosen as a U.S. Embassy suicide bomber. They checked into the Horizon Hotel in Mandaluyong. That was where he received an email from his contact he knew only as Saad. Saad would turn out to be Indonesian Fatur Rahman Al-Ghazi, an explosives trainer with the MILF, a key operative of Jemaah Islamiyah. He picked up the two men and brought them to case their targets. According to this FBI report, they decided they needed a plane to successfully attack the U.S. Embassy in Manila because it was set too far back from the road. The Israeli embassy was in a high-rise building in Makati, also hard to penetrate. That was when they decided to switch targets to another country, Singapore.
The Al-Qaeda has been able to transmit the kind of sense of jihad to the local groups while enabling the local groups to keep their own agenda in causing problems to their own countries concerned.
You will notice that some of the boxes.
Authorities in Singapore say this is a surveillance tape made by Jabara, Al-Ghazi, and other JI members. They sent it to Afghanistan for Al-Qaeda's approval. The plan to attack the U.S. Embassy and other Western targets in Singapore with 21 tons of explosives delivered in truck bombs. Intelligence sources say support cells in these countries were to lay the groundwork, and shortly before the planned attack, suicide bombers from outside the region would arrive to carry out the truck bombings. That plot was foiled by Singaporean authorities after they discovered a copy of the surveillance tape in the Singapore home of a JI member. On December 2001, Singapore arrested 13 JI members and 2 MILF supporters. It was the first time the name Jemaah Islamiyah publicly surfaced, and its links to Al-Qaeda and regional groups like the MILF exposed.
9/11 mastermind Khalid Sheikh Mohammed was arrested in Pakistan in March 2003. He is now in U.S. custody. Mohammed Mansoor Jabara is also now in custody in North America. He told his interrogators about the next major attack in Southeast Asia. More on that when 9/11, the Philippine Connection, returns. Al-Qaeda's goal, like the communists before it, is global domination, power, using religion as a tool. Although the 1995 Manila plot was foiled, it taught Al-Qaeda a key lesson. Instead of sending foreigners, far better to co-opt local groups for use as force multipliers.
In 1995, authorities in the Philippines learned the financing for the Manila terror cell came from Malaysia through a company called Consojaya. On its board of directors, Wali Khan Amin Shah. Below him, Ridwan Isamuddin, more commonly known as Hambali, an Indonesian cleric who trained in Afghanistan. In 1991, he traveled to Tawi-Tawi and stayed with a local family. Then he went to the MILF's Camp Abu Bakar, met its chairman Hashim Salamat, and stayed there for 9 months. In 1993, Hambali set up a clandestine group then based in Malaysia with another Indonesian cleric, Abu Bakar Ba'ashir. That group called itself the Muslim Brotherhood, or Jemaah Islamiyah, JI. Simultaneously, Hambali was also working closely with Al-Qaeda. In this U.S. intelligence document, KSM says it is more appropriate to classify Hambali as an Al-Qaeda operative working in Malaysia rather than a JI member. But Al-Qaeda also sent its own people to Southeast Asia. This is the first known videotape of an Al-Qaeda and JI training camp in Indonesia. Set in Poso, Sulawesi, reports of this camp first publicly surfaced in November 2001 in court documents in Spain after the arrest of an Al-Qaeda leader there. His group allegedly sent hundreds of Al-Qaeda operatives from Europe to Indonesia for training. The man who helped set it up was Omar Al-Farouk.
Omar Al-Farouk was Al-Qaeda's senior-most Southeast Asian representative. He was an Iraqi.
Al-Farouk first came to Southeast Asia in 1994. Along with the leader of one of Al-Qaeda's training camps in Afghanistan, he landed here in Mindanao, inside the MILF's Camp Abu Bakar. Here, Al-Farouk set up the first Al-Qaeda training camp in Southeast Asia, which spread its techniques and ideology.
The ideology is to establish the Islamic Caliphate.
These guys, as I have come to understand, would like to create a pan-Islamic empire, stretching from Indonesia to Turkey.
In 1997, Al-Qaeda tried to inspire Filipinos to become suicide bombers by sending an Arab suicide bomber who killed himself at a military checkpoint in Awang, Maguindanao. Until today, no Filipino has yet followed. Al-Qaeda and other radical groups would continue to train inside MILF camps. According to telephone intercepts by a Western intelligence agency, at least one camp was set up after a direct request by Osama bin Laden to MILF chief Hashim Salamat. The MILF has consistently denied working with Al-Qaeda. 1998, Suharto's 32-year rule ended and Al-Qaeda and JI took advantage of the new democracy. Omar Al-Farouk slipped into Indonesia and helped this man, Agus Dwakarna, become the leader of a militia group called Laskar Jundala, based in Poso, Sulawesi. The video found in Al-Qaeda propaganda tapes was of their camp, which also, according to court documents in Spain, brought in Al-Qaeda fighters from Europe. It's no coincidence the camp was in Poso, which has had sporadic violence between Muslims and Christians for years. In 1998, it flared into all-out war, much like neighboring Ambon, where more than 10,000 people have died in 3 years of fighting. That violence, officials now believe, was fueled by Al-Qaeda, which exploited local grievances. It's an important tactic. By fueling hatred between Muslims and Christians, religion becomes a motivating factor, and chaos weakens the hold of governments. It was so successful, Al-Qaeda's top leaders came to visit the region's conflict areas. During the height of the conflicts in 2000, Omar Al-Farouk acted as a guide for Ayman al-Zawahiri, Osama bin Laden's #2, and Mohammed Atef, who would later greenlight the Singapore plots. This intelligence document reveals why. This visit was part of a wider strategy of shifting the base of Osama bin Laden's terrorist operations from the subcontinent to Southeast Asia. World events and the crackdown after 9/11 stopped that from happening, but it showed a growing radicalization in the region.
The Southeast Asian region is turning in favor of Islamic militancy. We are seeing a number of small groups emerging as extremist groups.
By 2000, Jemaah Islamiyah had a strong structure with Bashir as the head of the JI Markaz, or the governing body. Hambali, the operations chief, was the head of Mantiki 1, the regional group covering Malaysia and Singapore. This group raised funds and acted as the central coordinating body. Mantiki 2 covers Indonesia and Sabah, while Kalimantan, Mindanao, and Sulawesi are under Mantiki 3, both areas for training and terror operations. Finally, a small fundraising cell was set up in Australia, Mantiki 4. For 7 years, JI concentrated on spreading its ideology. Now it would turn to terrorism. In 1999, Al-Farouk says he bombed the Istiqlal Mosque in Jakarta. It was allegedly ordered by Abu Bakr Bashir, who wanted Muslims to blame Christians in the hopes of triggering counterattacks. That was followed by the attack on the Philippine ambassador's house in Jakarta in August of 2000. About a week later, authorities would publish a sketch of the man who planted the bomb. A sketch I would remember when I came face-to-face with him in the Philippines 2 years later. The bomb was planted by Fatur Rahman Algozi, an Indonesian working with the MILF, the JI, and Al-Qaeda. He said he carried out the bombing under orders from Hambali. Hambali and Algozi, working with their local partners, would go on to more ambitious attacks. According to intelligence documents, they met again in Quiapo in December 2000. Hambali gave Algozi nearly $50,000 to buy explosives, used for 20 bombs which exploded in churches in Indonesia on Christmas Eve. Six days later, that was followed by 5 near-simultaneous explosions in Manila, with the largest at the LRT, killing 22 people. According to interrogation reports of JI members, from 1998 to 2000, Hambali funneled about $12,000 to the MILF and some $18,000 to Muslim fighters in Indonesia. JI provided $4,000 for the LRT bombing. Philippine police say the Manila bombs were set by Algozi working with the MILF, a claim denied by the MILF. Algozi first hit police radar screens after that bombing when he called a newspaper office and the PNP to claim responsibility. Police traced the cell phone number, which then placed calls to Malaysia. Now we know he called Hambali. When Algozi was arrested in Quiapo in January 2002, he was working on at least 3 other terror plots. Information from him led authorities to 1.2 tons of explosives in General Santos, slated for the truck bombing plots in Singapore. Only later, authorities would learn from a government informant that another 2 tons of explosives had been shipped to Indonesia through Borneo to the island of Bali. At the time of his arrest, Algozi knew about Bali. October 12, 2002, the worst terrorist attack since September 11. 5 near simultaneous explosions in Bali, which killed more than 200 people. It was a wake-up call for all the countries in our region, the first time we would have a homegrown suicide bomber. Nearly all the men who carried out those attacks admitted they trained in the southern Philippines.
Omar Al-Farouk was arrested in Indonesia and turned over to the United States in 2003. Mid-last year, he escaped from Bagram prison in Iraq. As for Algozi, 9 months after Bali, he escaped from Camp Crame and was killed soon after. Both men said they trained in Mindanao. More on that when 9/11 The Philippine Connection returns. Terrorists or freedom fighters, JI or MILF. Labels can be deceiving and may be part of the reason why this new generation of terrorists is so hard to fight. Let's take a look at the war of ideas within the Muslim world and how it's affected the MILF, our country's largest Muslim separatist group.
The Golden Mosque in Quiapo, Manila's best-known Muslim community. Only 5% of our country's 84 million people are Muslim, living in Asia's largest Christian nation. Most Muslims here complain they're poorly understood by most Filipinos, who constantly discriminate against them. The men we spoke with here say that discrimination got worse after 9/11.
Sabi namin, ito na naman ididi sa mga Muslim. Lahat na ginagawang masama o mabuting kabutihan, puro Muslim ang gumagawa, mga terorista.
This was another ploy to destroy Islam and the Muslims of this world.
We are moving targets of this, we are made as scapegoats, you know.
There is resentment and simmering anger here, lots of talk of conspiracy theories.
This U.S. government, it is politically and choreographed. You know, the U.S. government, they will give lives in order to protect the interest of the country.
Very soon, there is going to be a major confrontation with the Muslims.
And when talk turned to Osama bin Laden, many cheered.
Siyempre, natural. Binda din yan eh. Kaya lang kung, alimbaw, kung si Bin Laden gumawa dyan, alimbaw lang no. Kung si Bin Laden gumawa dyan, ibig sabihin, pinaglalaban yan yung mga kapwa ng mga Muslim nga pinapatay ng mga Israel.
The anger, the feelings of marginalization, and that one Muslim man can fight against an arrogant superpower. This is what Osama bin Laden exploits. From the beginning, his message appealed to Filipino Muslims. At one point, Al-Qaeda had a special Moro sub-brigade in Afghanistan. How did they get there? Largely through the efforts of the MILF and its former chief, Hashim Salamat, who answered bin Laden's call for jihad, the first modern holy war. He started sending Filipinos in 1980, 1 year after the Soviet Union decided to invade Afghanistan. They first came here to Quiapo, where they waited for visas and passports. Then they flew to Karachi and on to Lahore, where Salamat had set up an office. Then they went on to Afghanistan for at least 6 months of weapons training. The MILF's present chairman Al-Haj Murad says he fought in Afghanistan and met Osama bin Laden.
I met him personally. in Afghanistan. And we have our people in Afghanistan fighting side by side with the Afghan Mujahideen at that time. Because, well, all over the world, the Muslim countries contributed some people to join the fighting in Afghanistan.
Part of the funding came from bin Laden's brother-in-law, Mohammed Jamal Khalifa, who investigators say created bin Laden's financial support network here.
Jamal Khalifa headed NGOs as well as businesses that were used to funnel funds, as well as to bring recruits from Mindanao for religious training abroad, mainly in Pakistan. Religious training first, and then military training, and then some on-the-job training across the border in Afghanistan.
The MILF admits it received funding from Osama bin Laden and his brother-in-law, Khalifa.
Yes, he's coordinating with us his activities on helping the depressed communities. So we welcome his, because it's in the name of the International Islamic Relief Organization.
Just last month, the U.S. froze the funds of the International Islamic Relief Organization, or IIRO, in Indonesia and the Philippines, saying it bankrolled the Al-Qaeda network in Southeast Asia. The announcement identified Khalifa as a senior Al-Qaeda member who also funded the Abu Sayyaf. Globally, the Afghanistan experience provided the seeds for the growth of the terror network today.
All those who fought the Afghanistan war, the Afghan war, came back to their home grounds and started the campaign to Islamize their countries.
The MILF's Camp Abu Bakr became a meeting ground for many of these Afghan war veterans. Philippine intelligence reports chronicle the MILF's links with numerous international Muslim groups, including those which carried out terrorist attacks like Hezbollah, Harkatul Ansar, and Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda operative Omar Al-Farouk told Indonesian interrogators that he set up a training camp inside Camp Abu Bakr. In 1994, he was joined by this man, Malaysian Nasir Abbas. An Afghan war veteran, he became the leader of JI's Mantiki 3, which covers the Philippines and parts of Indonesia.
I think that this is also my chance to help the Muslim in Philippines. After I joined helping the Muslim in Afghanistan, I accept the offer only for helping Muslim in Southern Philippines by training them, because I have an expertise to train.
The MILF has repeatedly stated it has no formal ties to Al-Qaeda nor JI.
If there are people in the MILF who have relationship with other members of this GI or Al-Qaeda, then it's on the level of personal relationship.
That's not what Abbas says. In 1994, he says he set up JI's first training camp inside Camp Abu Bakr.
You set up and named Camp Hudaybiya, is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. When I reached in Philippines, in Mindanao, in the camp of Abu Bakr, I studied a little bit, and then I named the area as a Hudaybiya training camp.
This Philippine intelligence report obtained by ABS-CBN confirms what Abbas says. It states their first group of trainers was about 60 Filipinos who had cleared the land for the establishment of the camp. According to Nasir, those Filipinos were members of the MILF. Nasir gave this diagram to Indonesian authorities. It shows the layout of the camp, the guard post, the cadet barracks, the ammunition and weapons storeroom, instructors' barracks, short course barracks, mess hall, mosque, study hall, obstacle course, and 2 firing ranges. Nasir taught recruits how to use weapons and firearms. He joined JI, he said, because he wanted to live according to the Quran. Hudaybiya, he said, was a symbol of peace.
You went for peace, but yet you were very good in military operations. How do you put that together? You were training people to go to war.
Oh, yeah, it's different. Violence and military, it's different. We are helping the local people who are being attacked. What they say that attacked by the Philippine army. I never teach anybody to attack the civilian. I never teach anybody to attack the unarmed people.
The debate over the use of violence and killing civilians, Nasir said, split the JI after Osama bin Laden's 1998 fatwa or declaration of holy war against America and its interests. That is confirmed by Khalid Sheikh Mohammed to American interrogators. KSM said Bashir felt Hambali had become too close to Al-Qaeda in 2000. Bashir, according to KSM, wanted JI to focus on regional concerns.
Osama bin Laden ideas changed some of GI members, not all.
After the Bali blasts, Nasir was arrested by Indonesian police. He was in prison for 10 months and is now working with the authorities to try to help fight what he calls Islam's deviant ideology, the killing of innocent civilians in the name of bin Laden's war against America.
Deviant, this is from the eyes of Islam, the eyes of the believing, so we can say that they are deviant.
This is book translated by Indonesian.
He has become a key voice in Indonesia, a fledgling democracy, one of the few countries proving that democracy and Islam can go hand in hand. Indonesia has the world's largest Muslim population. 86% of its 220 million people are Muslims. Here, it's very clear the war against terrorism is a battle for the soul of Islam between a radical minority and a moderate majority. U.S. policies in the Middle East, its support of Israel, and invasion of Iraq fuel Muslim anger here and push moderates to sympathize with the radicals. That is JI's most potent weapon for recruitment. Here, authorities say it's difficult to ban Jamaah Islamiyah as a terrorist organization because it would be seen as an anti-Muslim act.
The name of GI is not so important, but the most important to be targeting is how to neutralize their ideology and their mindset.
Ikhlas, niat yang ikhlas. Kedua, harus sesuai dengan tuntunan Rasul.
That is why Nasir is speaking publicly about what Islam is and what it isn't, and countering radical propaganda that's become conventional wisdom. Abu Bakr Bashir, arrested, imprisoned, and now released, says Jamaah Islamiyah doesn't exist, that 9/11 and the Bali bombings were carried out by America, and many here believe him. Nasir testified against Bashir and was ostracized by his former friends.
People think that JI organization is created, is fictive, is not exist. People say that JI organization is created by government, by American.
Even in the Philippines, those ideas have gained believers.
What the U.S. government want to achieve is to have a global domination. After the Cold War, they are aware that the next threat to their is Islam.
How many Muslim countries they have taken already? Afghanistan, Iraq, next will be Syria, Lebanon.
We are the ones who are being terrorized. We are not the terrorists.
That is the propaganda war inside the Muslim world, a war the West is losing.
Around the world, moderate Muslim voices need to be heard. When we return, let's take a closer look at what JI did in the Philippines, its operatives and plots, including the testing of possible chem-bio weapons. What happened to Al-Qaeda after 9/11 is much like what happened to JI after Bali. The group's top leaders were arrested, but the cell networks remained, spreading their radical ideology and carrying out attacks without central leadership. In the Philippines, that meant Indonesian JI members worked more closely with Filipino groups and in some cases helped forge alliances between them.
The story of former JI leader Nasir Abbas shows the complex interpersonal relationships that hold JI and its networks together.
You will notice that some of the boxes...
This is the voice of Nasir's brother Hashim, the JI leader in Singapore who helped plan the truck bombing attacks. He is now in custody in Singapore. His sister Farida is married to Muklas, the operations chief of the Bali bombings. He and his two brothers were convicted for the attacks. He is now on death row. And Nasir rose to become Hambali's equal, heading Mantiki 3, in charge of working with the training camps in Indonesia and the Philippines. While here, he said he learned to adapt and to love Filipino culture.
Ikaw marunong kang managalog? Ako marunong pero matagal na hindi ko magsalita ng Tagalog.
But even now, he tried to shield his former hosts, the MILF.
They do not know that we are JI. They know that we are Indonesian, come to help them.
While that may have been true in the early 90s, the MILF switched strategies in 1999 when it set up its Special Operations Group to make up for significant battlefield losses. That, analysts say, was when it turned to terrorism.
MILF is tacitly and secretly providing assistance to the Indonesian terrorist groups. MILF is harboring, providing weapons and funding and protection to the Indonesian terrorist groups.
So far there has
MILF chairman Al-Haj Murad denies that until today.
There was no formal training conducted by this GI in our area.
That isn't true, says Sydney Jones, who heads the International Crisis Group. She says at its height, JI was training as many as 30 members per class at the JI Military Academy inside Camp Abu Bakar.
Is the Philippines a haven of sorts? Is it becoming a haven of sorts?
I think the Philippines has been a haven. I don't think it's becoming a haven. It's seen as a refuge, as a place that people being pursued by authorities in Malaysia and in Indonesia can flee to and find a safe haven.
As early as 1995, the Philippine government was worried about the training camps, and for the first time, ABS-CBN learned of a government plan then to attack the MILF camps.
Under President Ramos, our security assessments already showed that the MILF was gearing for war. They were recruiting people. We had intelligence reports of foreign trainers that were going to Abu Bakar. We were quietly, from the government side, preparing ourselves to mount an offensive to degrade the strength of the MILF because they had become quite aggressive in occupying more territory in central Mindanao.
But the government didn't take action then because President Ramos said he hoped the MILF would sign a peace agreement. When it didn't, training continued until 2000. From March 16 to June 12, 2000, the military's 4th Division captured 15 major MILF camps, 49 satellite camps, a training base, and control tower. It was, then President Estrada declared, all-out war. For the first time, JI members fought side by side with the MILF. That had an impact on future relationships.
It forced the remaining JI members into greater cooperation and greater active involvement with the activities both of the MILF and of Abu Sayyaf.
This neighborhood in Cotabato City gives an idea of how JI intertwined itself with its Filipino hosts and how links formed here from 1995 till now lead across the globe. For a time, this was the safe house of JI. It's owned by the family of Filipino J.B. Ofracio, a Muslim convert who worked in Saudi Arabia, sent there by JMB Personnel and Management Services, a company linked to the 1995 network of Khalifa, bin Laden's brother-in-law. Its owner was arrested in Manila after 9/11, accused of being part of an Al-Qaeda sleeper cell.
sinipa-sipa yung pintuan.
Afrasyo's brother-in-law, Jordan Abdullah, ran a money-changing business in Cotabato City. His house was raided by police in 2004.
Bigla ang raid yan ng CIDG, yun lang. Yun lang, biglaan lang. Wala akong alam.
He was later arrested, suspected of laundering at least $25,000 for JI. JB Afrasyo is now in custody in Belfast, Northern Ireland, charged with 2 counts of making funds and property available for international terrorism. Afrasyo says he is innocent. Gunaratna has seen some of the evidence against Afrasyo.
JB Afrasyo is the most important Jama Islamiyah member to be arrested outside Southeast Asia. He was living in Belfast in Northern Ireland, and he was still working on jihad. He had with him the largest collection of terrorist training manuals we have ever seen.
One of the documents discovered in this house alarmed authorities. Written in Indonesian, authorities say it is a rudimentary chem bio manual. ABS-CBN obtained a portion of the classified document and translated it into English. It shows JI has tested deadly and toxic chemicals in Mindanao for possible terror attacks.
The JI Chem Bio Manual was produced in the Philippines by JI working together with some of its best brains. It clearly showed that it had the intention to conduct chemical and biological attacks.
The documents describe the characteristics of several toxic gases: cyanide, hydrogen sulfide, phosphine, as well as toxic bacteria which cause botulism. The pages show how to make these poisons from available materials and how JI tested these poisons on farm animals. This page describes use of hydrogen cyanide. The gas was mixed in a closed box with a healthy living rabbit. Result, rabbit died within half a minute. For cyanide, which was mixed with ordinary skin cream, the document states, rub into skin on a rabbit's neck. The rabbit will faint in 8 minutes and die in 20.
This manual raised the threat level of Southeast Asian governments towards JI, because this is the first time we came to know that JI had developed a chem bio manual.
This is not the first time documents and videotapes have shown evidence of Al-Qaeda efforts to create poison weapons. This tape, obtained by CNN in Afghanistan, show Al-Qaeda testing gas on dogs. This classified analysis of the documents, however, downplays the threat, saying it is difficult to turn biochemical agents into weapons. In nearly every case, the firing device for operation or the way the poison will be delivered to mass targets is not yet perfected.
It is difficult to operationalize chemical and biological weapons, but certainly they have the interest to do so.
Police found the JI safe house in Cotabato after the arrest of Indonesian JI member Taufik Rifki in 2003. In these intelligence documents obtained by ABS-CBN, Rifki talks about how JI forged the relationship between the MILF and the Abu Sayyaf, or the ASG. That allowed the ASG to train in MILF camps, something the MILF had always resisted. The JI officer assigned to train the ASG is 25-year-old Rohmat. He was interviewed by ABS-CBN reporter Jay Ruiz soon after his arrest last year. He gives an idea how closely JI and ASG are working together.
Ako JI. Tapos, inutusan sa ASG. Tapos sama-sama na kami. Ako, yung buhay ko, ngayon sa ASG na. Sama-sama kami.
Now, JI began to pass on its bomb-making skills and technology, upgrading ASG skills. Plus, the MILF alliance allowed ASG to expand to central Mindanao.
Pag sa Mindanao ito, wala ang lugar sa ASG. Wala silang membro. Kaya yung pinagtaguan nila ay lugar ng MILF. Tapos, siyempre nagtutulong sila sa pagbili ng pagkain, gano'n na pagdaan, halimbawa may kailangan.
That alliance between JI, MILF, and ASG led to several joint bombing operations in 2003, including at Kidapawan City, North Cotabato. the Cotabato Airport bombing, the KCC Mall and public market bombings in Coronadal City, South Cotabato, and the public market in Parang.
In 2004, the terrorist attacks moved beyond Mindanao towards Luzon and the capital, Manila. This police say happened after JI and ASG enticed another radical group to join, the Raha Sulaiman Movement, or RSM. Up next, the largest maritime terrorist attack globally and the danger ahead when 9/11, the Philippine Connection returns. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. That's what counterterrorism officials say we're seeing today. Labels are quickly losing their meanings. If you want to understand what's going on, look at the actions. In many instances, the alliances are fluid and based largely on personal relationships.
The paradox of the Mindanao peace process is that it presents the short-term obstacle to actively rooting out the terror network today. Yet it is indispensable for any long-term solution. By most accounts, the MILF seems sincere in negotiating an agreement. Yet the JI members captured say several commands are still giving sanctuary and support to JI and its associate groups.
I think the peace talks are putting a lot of pressure on the MILF to basically tell JI that they're no longer welcome. And I think it's also putting pressure on them to bring their own rogue commanders into line.
Yet it also seems clear that even if a peace agreement is negotiated, the more radical members may split off, mirroring what happened in the 1996 Peace Pact. The MILF refused to sign, and the same dynamics remain today.
There are still two factions in the MILF. I feel that if a peace deal will be struck, it will be with the secularists, but the Islamists will probably evolve into another group.
That extremist group is heavily courted by the Abu Sayyaf, and what many fear is that JI may work to unite the extremists, men who believe in the same virulent ideology.
The single biggest threat we are seeing in Southeast Asia is that JI is providing training to Southeast Asian terrorist groups. JI has become the Al-Qaeda of Southeast Asia.
The Abu Sayyaf is a ready partner, with JI helping its leader Gaddafi Janjalani return the group to its ideological roots. According to the 9/11 Commission report, Al-Qaeda helped create the ASG in the late 80s. It began attacking churches and missionaries in 1991, kidnapping 2 Spanish nuns in Sulu, Spanish priest Father Blanco, American missionary Charles Walton. Between 1991 to 1995, the ASG was responsible for 67 terrorist attacks, largely funded by bin Laden's brother-in-law, Khalifa. And then there was Ipil, an attack so violent Alunan called it the opening shot in the war to establish an Islamic State in Mindanao. But the breakup of the USAF cell led to the disintegration of the ASG's ideological link. By the time the US designated it a terrorist organization in 1997, it had all but abandoned terrorism. In 2000, the ASG began a massive kidnapping spree. The Sipadan hostages allegedly brought in up to $18 million in ransom. For a time, the ASG was largely dismissed as a kidnap for ransom gang. No longer. The shift happened in 2002, a joint operation between JI and ASG which killed 3 people, including a US Special Forces soldier, all overseen by Gaddafi Janjalani. In 2004, JI allegedly gave $18,500 to the ASG for training. JI trainer Rohmat says he worked very closely with Gaddafi, particularly in ASG's most spectacular attack yet. That was the beginning of another alliance. On February 27, 2004, a bomb detonated on Super Ferry 14, killing more than 190 people by some estimates. It was the world's worst maritime terrorist attack, the second most lethal in the region after Bali. According to Taufik Rifki's interrogation reports, JI and ASG tried to extort $1 million from WGNA, the owner of Super Ferry 14. The letter was written by Janjalani and delivered by Rohmat. After 3 letters were ignored, Janjalani sent text messages forbidding Muslims to board the company's ships. Then he assembled the team. It took 8 months before the government admitted it was the work of JI, the Abu Sayyaf, and its new recruit from the Raha Suleiman movement, or RSM, a radical group of Christian converts. This man, Redendo Cain del Llosa, claimed he carried the explosives inside a cardboard box on board the ship.
Del Llosa, who is a Balik Islam or a new convert, who belongs to the Raja Suleiman revolutionary movement, he was trained by Jama Islamia. So we are seeing JI working very closely with a number of groups.
That alliance appeared again a year later in the February 14 bus bombings in Manila, coordinated with blasts in Davao and General Santos cities. It shows the importance of the RSM, its close ties with the ASG, their Indonesian JI mentors, and the MILF commanders who shelter all 3 groups.
We're seeing a vehicle by which some of the terrorist activities that up till now have been confined to the south, having at least the potential for moving north.
JI increased the sophistication of Filipino bombs, partly through the teachings of 2 Bali bombers, Dulmatin and Umar Patek, who have been in Mindanao since 2003. Last year, authorities found more sophisticated bombs injected into toothpaste tubes and shampoo bottles. Intelligence officials say these bombs are intended for planes. In the last year, numerous terrorist plots have been foiled, involving this alliance between JI, ASG, and RSM, including Madrid-style bombings, a plot to bomb the U.S. Embassy, a plot to assassinate selected officials, and several plots involving suicide bombers, allegedly from the RSM. The alleged leader of RSM is now in prison. Arrested last October, 35-year-old Ahmed Santos converted to Islam in 1992 through ISCAG, the Islamic Studies Call and Guidance, one of the groups linked to Osama bin Laden's brother-in-law, Mohammed Jamal Khalifa. According to authorities, RSM is built upon Khalifa's network, which was largely left unscathed since 1995. Like JI, authorities point to interpersonal links. Santos married into the top ranks of the ASG. The sister of his second wife is married to Gaddafi Janjalani, while another sister is married to the ASG's second-in-command, Abu Suleiman. Although Santos admits the personal ties, he says he is not a terrorist and is being unjustly detained.
There's no such thing as Raja Suleiman.
You say RSM doesn't exist at all? It is not a terrorist group?
Sinasabi ko, wala talaga ng RSM. Hindi siya nag-exist. Kung nag-exist man siya, sa kanila galing yun, hindi sa amin.
Did you train with the MILF?
Gusto ko sana.
Did you ever set up a bomb? Did you do explosives?
No.
Yet authorities say Santos and his 2 brothers traveled to Camp Abu Bakar in 1999 to meet with MILF leaders. And in December 2001, Santos got military and explosives training at another MILF camp in Lanao del Sur. Santos does admit to setting up an Islamic community in Anda, Pangasinan. Police raided that in 2001, calling it a training camp. 2 men arrested then admitted carrying out the Super Ferry and the February 14 bombings.
These attacks have happened and people have been killed by some of the men you know.
Hindi ko masagot ng direksyon kasi unang-una, nung wala na sila doon, buhay na nila yun. I mean, Di ba? This is all about religion. Doon lahat babalik. Lahat ng issue na ito babalik lahat sa religion.
What does jihad mean?
Most and foremost is to protect the Muslims. And as a whole kasi, ang pinoproteksyonan niya talaga is the religion. The religion itself. Ang Muslim kahit hindi magsalita sa'yo yan. Ang Muslim kahit hindi yan magsabi sa'yo, it is the faith na magsasabi sa kanya kung ano nararamdaman niya. Dahil sa amin may kasabihan, parang sa atin din, sa Pilipino, di ba? Ang kasakit ng kalingkingan, sakit ng buong katawan. Yan ang katuruan sa amin. Yan ang katuruan sa amin. Mas mag-ingat ka doon sa mga hindi nagsasalita.
Police investigators say Santos is an experienced propagandist. When he was arrested in Mindanao last year, he was allegedly the chief of the ASG Media Bureau, which he vehemently denied. Yet, according to a classified report obtained by ABS-CBN, Santos told police that JI gave RSM 250,000 pesos to be used in a truck bombing plot in Manila. The document states Santos envisioned to stage a Bali-like bombing using 1 ton of explosives to attack a night spot frequented by foreigners in Ermita. 16 sacks of explosives were found in this house in Quezon City, along with circuitry diagrams as well as lists of potential targets for a series of attacks during Holy Week this year. Santos admitted the plot soon after he was arrested in an interview with Jay Ruiz.
Yung bomba na yun.
Building.
Kahit halimbawa 4-story building. Ilagay mo siya sa gitna, gigibayin niya. Inaamin ko, sino totoo? Unang-una. Pangalawa, at least malaman ng lahat na meron talagang nakikipaglaban. Na kailangan to the extent na gagawin niya lahat para ma-attain yung goal. Because we believe this is a fight, this is a war.
When I reminded him of that interview, he said he was under pressure.
Sabog yata ako. Na, mahirap kasing ano niya. Una-una, it has something to do with the case. Second, during those times, nasa kanila kami. So, my wife, my sister-in-law, and other 5, nandun kami sa kanila. So, anything they want, you understand. Yun. Kasi ang kinakatakot ko lang kasi mahilig sila mandamay sa pamilya.
Were you tortured?
Yeah. Pwede ko ba sabihin? Lalo kaming pag-iinitan. Kasi yun ang kinakatakot ko para sa akin. Kasi hanggang ngayon hindi nila tinatantanan yung family ko.
Charges of human rights violations complicate counter-terrorism efforts globally, just as charges of discrimination muddle the threat posed by this virulent ideology today.
Look at the bombings in Greenbelt. Bojinka, 911, Madrid, London, and it's pretty clear that we're up against a group that's willing to kill anyone to impose their religion on us, their version of Islam on us, which I think the majority of the Muslim world rejects.
Do you have any regrets? Do you regret anything that you've done?
I feel upset because I trained them before, I teach them before. Now they misuse the knowledge. They kill and they attack the civilians people. This is what I regret.
9/11 changed the way we move, the way we travel, the freedoms we enjoy. 5 years later, Al-Qaeda, like JI, is battered and dispersed, but the ideology has spread like poison. The threat we face today is no longer 1 or 2 groups, but a movement which has found supporters here.
I'd like to leave you with some last thoughts. First, this is the time for Muslim moderates to speak up and tell the world what Islam is and what it isn't. The attacks prove the threat is real, and we need to understand what's going on because we have to find the balance between trading in some civil liberties in exchange for greater security. That ends 9/11, the Philippine Connection. I'm Maria Ressa. Thank you for joining us.